Creating a better system of care for people with disabilities is creating a better system of care for all Australians.
But that proud boast 10 years ago turned out to be wide of the mark, simply because the legislation is limited to persons aged under 65.
When I turned 65, I woke up and I still had the same paralysed legs. I was still using the same wheelchair and leg braces.
Peter Freckleton contracted polio when he was 6.
I was just sitting up in bed and 2 men in white coats came through the door and dragged me out into an ambulance. I couldn't lift my head. I couldn't twitch a toe.
Peter never let his disability hold him back. He practiced law in Australia and France, but he was over 65 when the NDIS was established, and unlike younger polio survivors, he wasn't eligible.
The ones that had it at 18 months old just managed to beat the age guillotine and get access to NDIS. Born 52, tickety-boo. Born before, out the door.
Bill Shorten, the minister in charge of the NDIS, now says the National Disability Insurance Scheme wasn't created for every Australian with a disability of every age. So anyone over 65 has to rely on the aged care system.
5 months after he turned 65, he was diagnosed with motor neurone disease.
Maybe you need to show this to the doctor.
When John took this video to his doctor, the diagnosis was swift.
Classic sign of motor neurone disease called fasciculations. From John's neck down, his skin and muscles roll and flinch. When we walked out of the When we walked out of the specialist, we got as far as the car park and John stopped and looked at me and said, "Well, I've just been handed a death sentence."
John and Tracy had to abandon the small business they'd spent decades building up.
Life as we knew it stopped. John's gone on to a disability pension. I've had to go on to a carer's pension. We can't afford to get backup care. My daughter will get dragged into it as an unpaid carer.
To save money, they're selling their home and moving interstate, away from their friends at the RSL, their charity work for everything from leukemia to drought victims, and the fishing club, where John just became a life member.
You've lost your business, you've lost your income, you're about to lose your house. You've worked all your life, and the government gives you a pension. How do you survive?
Lawyer Rick Mitri is preparing a class action, and in just a few weeks, hundreds of people have expressed interest in taking the government to the High Court.
One person said, "Look, they've just left me here to rot. I can't get off my bed. Nobody comes to support me or care for me because I can't afford carers."
The class action will claim that by barring over 65s from the NDIS, the government is in breach of the United Nations Disability Convention.
It prohibits discrimination against people with disability on all grounds, and that obviously would include age.
Peter Freckleton is also the class action's lead plaintiff.
One big difference is with disability, you often need equipment. The NDIS covers that sort of thing, that's what it's designed for, and with the aged care system, it's capped at a certain amount per year.
What John needs is in a totally different scope to what aged care provides. This isn't aged care, this is intense care.
The disease is your nerves, your muscles, all that. Your brain is still operating, but you just can't do anything for yourself.
You become a prisoner.
It puts it in your own body.
Yeah,
And that's
it's cruel.
so sad.
It's cruel.
According to the NDIS, the average yearly cost for a neurological condition is $136,000. When John can access aged care at home after he turns 67, he'll only get about $54,000. Bill Shorten says including over 65s in the scheme would be very expensive.
I would say that the net cost would be zero, because if you were to clean up the rorts, that would save about $1 billion.
Meanwhile, John and Tracy are getting ready to move to South Australia.
We can afford to be near Adelaide Hospital, which has an excellent motor neurone association, and they also have voluntary assisted dying coming into practice as of next year.
We'll again be able to move forward. The fish is not bad down there.
It's devastating. It just feels like a massive loophole that wasn't considered. And if it's not the NDIS covering it, then you think something else should be, because it was a brilliant point that aged care is different to living with a disability. They're two different things.
I don't know if it was a loophole. It sounds like it's a decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing about it.
Yeah.
I don't know how you change a government's mind then on that, right? Because especially at a time like this where they're being confronted with cost blowouts, all this sort of thing, what would be the argument that would turn them around?
Yeah, well, exactly right. It doesn't need to be something else distinct from the NDIS for people over 65. And the fact that there isn't appears to be the big problem.
And that's the gap.